Hello and welcome everybody to yet another tutorial. Today we're actually going to be going over a broad range of heroes. We're going to be looking at how to make a DPS hero, how to efficiently spec them, redo their stats, and how to be useful in games so that you can be a lot more useful. A lot of people in Dungeon Defenders do not experience a lot of building time. Most people will not build too often, and if they do, it's usually at lower levels and not at a lot of the higher end Nightmare games which they wish to join to be able to get better gear. So there's quite a few things that you need to know, but first off we're going to look at the hero itself. So here's one of the main DPS classes that is quite popular. It's the monk. There's many reasons why the monk is extremely popular. First reason is that the pet. If you put a good pet on a monk, they do much more damage at similar stats than they do on other heroes. This is because pets scale with the hero attack right here, your stat for hero attack, but with the monk they scale much higher. In terms of, you can think about it like as if it was this 19,728 damage of my seahorse is times by something related to my hero attack, but it's not a one-to-one scale. So the higher on monks, I can have 3,000 hero attack, and my seahorse would do much more damage than if I put on, let's say, a barbarian who had 4,000 hero attack. So this makes the monk quite strong with regards to DPS pets, and DPS pets get a massive boost to damage in Nightmare compared to your regular towers. DPS pets actually do more damage in Nightmare than they do in Insane, whereas your individual damage that's dealt by your weapons does about 15%. That is extremely low compared to Insane. Now, what else can we say about the monk? There's quite a few other unique things that make the monk a very viable, well-rounded DPS character. First thing is tower boost. At approximately 2,000 tower boost, you're going to be seeing something like 2.5 times to 3 times the damage output. Close to 3 times from all of your towers. So, if we were to lay down a tower, so let's say a lightning tower, and you look at the damage right now, the attack damage is approximately 1,400, just to make math easy. Turn on tower boost, this suddenly jumps to 3,700. Wow, that's a lot of extra damage. So as you can see, that's a massive amount of extra damage that the tower now does. Now as you can see, there is this yellow glowing ring emanating from my character. This is the range of the ability Tower Boost. So it's got a very long range. It does not drain mana too fast. And in addition to increasing the damage all of your towers deal, it greatly enhances their ability to repair themselves. All of the towers will heal damage or be repaired automatically by this ability at a reasonable rate, provided that it's touching them, of course, and they have taken damage. So, now let's look at the next ability. The next ability is called Hero Boost. This is probably the most important one when it comes to actually dealing the damage. Although Tower Boost is extremely useful. As you can see, once again, this time it's a purple ring that emanates from the monk. Any hero within this ring will have their damage substantially increased. Currently, in my current stat, I'm looking at about 3.5 times additional damage by having this on. This also affects the amount of damage your pets does, and makes a massive difference in the amount of damage you can do. It's a very useful ability, and it also will cause heroes to heal ever so slightly. Now, the monk sounds like a great character. He can have melee weapons that do a lot of damage, or he can have ranged projectiles, making him very versatile. A lot of people do choose range with monk, although my personal preference just happens to be melee, because I like it, not much other reason. Now, when you're making a DPS hero, there's a few things that you have to consider. Obviously, your 4 main hero stats, such as hero health, attack, run speed, and cast rate, but also your 2 hero abilities, which for the monk is the tower boost and the hero boost, and your resistances are the last important thing with the stats. Now this is how you build your hero and make him better. Obviously the hero health is pretty self-explanatory. The higher this goes, the more health you get, which can be very useful surviving more than one hit before dying. Next is the hero attack. Obviously, the higher this is, the more damage you will do, including your pets. And the hero run speed is actually not important at all. Once the hero run speed hits 100 points, no matter how many extra points are put into it, your hero will simply not run any faster. So it is advisable to stop once you've hit 100 points. Or, if by chance your armor puts you above 100, just don't worry about putting any extra points into it, as in your hero points. And of course, cast rate is somewhat important because as a DPS hero you should be able to repair and upgrade towers within the game at a reasonable rate. So you want to have at least about 600, preferably a little bit more than 600 hero cast rate. And your two abilities, a lot of times people will choose to focus heavily on one ability over the other because it's very hard to find armor that balances all of your stats and gives you good heroes abilities as well. So often players will choose to focus on one more than the other. If you're going to be a ranged person and sit back a little bit behind the defenses, quite often it's useful to increase your tower boost. This will also allow you to go much further in games, but many people these days play hard, long games with summoners out to get armor only drops, so this ability is sometimes not as useful. Also, your hero attack boost is extremely vital, but you only need one monk to activate this for the entire group at a time. So it's your choice which abilities you want to work on. Lastly are resistances. A lot of people don't realize that resistances are the most important part about having a high level DPS character, especially in Nightmare mode. When you go into Nightmare mode, all of your resistances are reduced to approximately 55%, if I remember correctly, of their insane levels, which means that they're nowhere near as high when you go into insane. All of your armor pieces must show approximately 41% in each resistance. As you can see with me, if you look at the generic damage, I have 40%, 42%, 42%, and 40. So the two 42s make the other two the equivalent of 41. So I would have 41 on all four pieces, which in Nightmare will give me 90%. Now, a lot of people don't really seem to understand resistances, so I can't stress this enough. It's very, very important. If you think about it this way, in Nightmare, an ogre might be able to do 1 million damage in just a single hit. And that's without even going into the high level waves of survival that get extremely hard. So if an ogre is able to do 1 million damage to you, and in Nightmare, my health is 200,000 HP. So, I would obviously die in one hit exactly. Now, if we throw a strength drain aura into the mix, and let's say we make the enemy 20% of his normal strength, so now he's down to 200,000. Well, that would still kill me in one hit. So that's where the resistances come in. When you're at 90%, the enemy only deals 10% of his damage to you. So, instead of taking 200,000 damage, I would actually take 10% of that, which is 20,000, allowing me to survive 10 hits before dying. This is quite large. In addition, most enemies have an elemental ability or attack when they are in Nightmare. So if you see any form of glowing green poison, lightning bolts around them, or fire, that means they do additional elemental damage. So it's important to have elemental resist. Generic is obviously the most important, as all enemies can deal generic damage, but fire is easily the second most important, as goblin choppers do fire damage with their rockets that deal massive amounts of damage. Some of those rockets can deal up to, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 million damage a hit. You know, potentially, I don't know for certain. Anyways, that's a lot of damage. So you want to have your fire resistances to be upgraded as much as possible along with your generic. And then of course poison is probably the next most important due to ogres regularly throwing poison balls. And then lightning is still important, but that's the one that always lets suffer the most. Now a lot of people, they will go into a game and they will have stats that are similar to mine or higher in these first four categories, but their resistances will be really low, such as maybe 70, 20, 10, and 5. These players are absolutely useless in many of the high-level games on harder maps, because most of the enemies, even inside of a strength drain aura, will still be able to kill you in exactly one hit, and it's very, very, very hard to make sure you dodge every single hit, and you're also a lot less useful to the team if you have no mobility because you have to hide behind all of the reflect beams and out of damage. So make sure you work on those resistances. Now, when you're upgrading armor, there's quite a few neat things that you can do. I think I've shown players this before, but I'm not quite certain. If we look at an individual piece of armor, we can click the Pro Mode box as I've shown before to be able to start upgrading the armor. Now, of course, first thing you want to do is you want to get one of these resistances maxed out as quick as possible, usually the highest one, or if they're all similarly tied, you'd go for generic. Now we're going to watch the next level. I'm going to upgrade until I see a 9 there, so just before I hit 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. Now notice I can once again put another point in generic. Now I can't anymore because it's been maxed out. So if I put another 9 upgrades into a resistance, Suddenly on the 10th I can do this. So when you're upgrading your armor, usually the first thing you want to do is max out all of your resistances. So we will continue to do this. But as you max out all of your resistances, you want to make sure that every 10th level you're remembering to upgrade your resistance just over the cap. And of course we want to do generic. Now I'm not wearing this armor, so I don't know when I will reach 41% with the set bonus. You can calculate that if you want, or just when you're wearing it. But the idea is you will keep upgrading until you're at about 40% on your generic, and then you'll move into your fire, and then your poison, and then your lightning. Sometimes, if you know your armor is not going to get anywhere near the cap, you might choose to maximize your generic and kind of spread out amongst poison and fire a little bit more. As you can see, once again, able to do an extra upgrade, and now all of my resistances are maxed out. I can't upgrade any of them anymore unless I hit every 10th level. So now you're allowed to start upgrading your hero points. So this is how all of your DPS armor should be upgraded, or if you know it's armor you're not going to be keeping for a long time because you'll get something better, you should just stop once you've maxed your resistances and not waste your money maximizing these stats when you'll probably replace the armor within a few games. In addition, you are able to respec your hero to reapply your bonus points based on how many points you've earned from what level you are. Now there are many things that you can do here. Sometimes you might choose to balance out some of your ability points here. I just want to make this a nice even 2,000, so I'm going to add some points just because I wanted to. I'm going to add a little bit of health because the monks usually have very low health. So I want to give him just a little bit of a boost to make sure that he's able to survive a bit longer. My cast rate is sufficient, so I'm not going to add anything to there. My run speed is obviously well above 100, so definitely don't need to add anything there. And I'm not too worried about adding any points to my tower boost, so now I'm just going to put the rest into hero damage. But there may be times where you need to put some points into any of the other abilities or stats on your hero. So, I'm going to assume that most of you know the basics about armor, but we will go over it anyways. If you wear all armor of the same material, now notice this is transcendent plate type, so its type is plate. All of my pieces of armor will be plate. You'll notice they have a glowing blue outline. This means you get a set bonus, so when all 4 pieces match, all of the stats are multiplied by the bonus. For transcendent, this bonus is approximately 33% to all of the stats. If we look at these stats, of 506 health and 559 hero damage bonus, and then we put it in the item box and look at it, you'll notice they're much lower, 380 and 420. So it can make a huge difference once you start getting good armor to make sure you have the set bonus. In addition, of course, you can add accessories to add to your stats. Accessories are either for looks or to add massively to your points. As you can see with this specific one, I got a lot of extra points from wearing it. Now that we've figured out how to actually put the armor on and how to distribute our stats to make sure that our hero is able to survive a lot better and have sufficient abilities such as running, casting, and his unique hero abilities, we have to look at how we do damage. Now, whenever you have a DPS pet, majority of the time everything has to go into these 3 stats here. The attack speed bonus, the number of projectiles if it gives you additional, and then the rest goes into damage. There is no point to upgrading any of these stats here if this pet is supposed to do damage. Every point that you put into the hero damage bonus will do a lot less damage than every point you put into the base damage. We're talking about easily 100 times less, if not, yeah, huge difference. So you want to make sure that once these 2 are maxed out, everything else is just going into base damage. Now, similar thing applies to your weapon. It really doesn't matter too much about weapons in terms of the stats for how much damage you'll do. It's nice to have additional stat points here to give you casting rate, to give you run speed, to give you health, to give you things that aren't directly related to your damage. But more importantly is the base damage. Now each weapon behaves a little differently. Some weapons attack faster than others, so they will do more damage at a lower base damage, but in general you want to find a weapon that gets you to the highest base damage possible. Obviously you can go on the forums and ask around, or look for some links to find out what some of the best weapons are, as people have already figured this out based on how they attack and how well they multiply this base damage to your hero attack. So that's the important thing. Your weapon will do the most damage by having a good weapon with a very high base damage. It's not the stats on the weapon that matter anywhere near as much as your base damage. You can have a builder who is supposed to be active and give them a weapon with really high tower stats and upgrade the base attack, and they'll actually be able to fight on their own while being out during a wave, provided they do not die. Of course, they will need some resistances and some health to be able to not die. So that's the basics of how you build a hero. Now we're going to look at remaining few types of DPS heroes that I like to use. Next up is the Jester. Now the Jester here is quite an interesting character. He can run extremely fast compared to the other heroes at the default run speed of 100, which makes him extremely invaluable about getting around the map. In addition to that, the Jester has very high health scaling. As you can see, he has similar points in hero health as the monk, but yet his health is much higher. Easily double the health of a monk at similar stats. In addition, the Jester is able to carry 2 weapons, so he can use his second weapon just to give him pure extra stats, or a weapon that's just useful in some manner. But in this case, this weapon is just being used to give him extra stat points, which is extremely useful in making your hero better when you only really need one weapon that it can attack. But some people will choose to use an offhand weapon that has abilities such as a portal gun. Also, the Jester has 2 unique abilities that we will cover, since everything else is pretty similar to the rest. One thing I did not mention as well is Jester has a higher cast rate than the majority of heroes, so he will cast faster than most, although having to go this high is not exactly mandatory. Now he has 2 unique abilities. The first one, of course, is Move Tower. So if we were to build a tower, but a Sharkin chooses to move that tower, or it turns out that we place that tower in the wrong position, the Jester is able to use his Move Tower ability, which the tavern will not let me activate. Maybe I'll show that to you later. But what the Move Tower does is it gives a large ring around your hero, similar to how the repair button does, but it gets much larger than this with a high stats. And you can click on any tower within this circle, and you can move it to any other point within the circle. It will also let you re-rotate towers that need a specific rotation. Of course, it does not let you rotate things such as physical walls, sadly. The other ability that the Jester has is called Wheel of Fortuna. I will not go into too much detail here, but the Wheel of Fortuna is an extremely valuable ability. This one has a lot of powerful attacks. It has one, if you hit 3 red potions in a row, you get to repair everything on the map for a certain amount of HP. In addition, heal all players. It has another one which deals damage to all enemies, as well as one that kills a percentage of enemies on the map. Jester is used by many people whenever they're not fighting bosses, but can also be a formidable opponent to fight a boss with if you have the right backup. Now, for looking at pets, I want to show one unique pet that gives extra attack to heroes. This is called a prop cat by most people, because it's short for propeller cat. You get this from Sky City on Survival. What a propeller cat does is it has something called a boost intensity. At my current boost intensity of 192, it basically doubles the amount of damage that my character does, as well as up to 4 heroes in total at a range of 42. So, by having a propeller cat on, my Jester is actually able to do a significant amount of DPS. In the tavern, it gets up to 60 million DPS currently. Now, if I throw a monk hero boost on top of that, by having another monk in the game who can hero boost, I can easily get over 200 million DPS at times, which is quite high. Now, the Jester, unlike the monk, the scaling is not quite as good for DPS pets, so most people will choose not to put a DPS pet on their Jester. Usually it'll be a propeller cat or a genie to collect mana, because Jesters are often used for upgrading thanks to their extremely fast casting rate. Now, the other type of hero, I don't have a barbarian class, but I do have a squire. Squire and barbarian are similar, although most people do prefer barbarian due to the fact that they can reach much higher levels of damage. Now a Squire though does have one nice ability. It has Blood Rage, which is able to increase the pet damage of my Seahorse significantly, similar to Monk Tower Boost. So, I'm able to do a reasonably large amount of damage with my Squire thanks to the Seahorse pet. Also, the Squire has the ability to block, and if you get a weapon that has 100% block, you will take absolutely no damage from any enemies that are shooting approximately in front of you or a little bit off to the side. This can be very useful on some maps against things such as bosses or standing in front of your defenses with block so your defenses don't take too much damage. Squire also has Circular Slice, which does a massive amount of damage in a large circular pattern around him, dealing damage to many enemies. And the Blood Rage ability also makes him run a lot faster, but it does take up a lot of mana, so it regularly does not last too long, which is one of the main drawbacks of the Squire. Squire though also has a very high health pool, and his cast rate is relatively decent. So obviously with the Squire it's really up to you what you want to do, but most of the time you'll try and find a sword with a good amount of block, because that's the main point of being a Squire over a Barbarian, is to have the block, and of course be able to use a DPS pet with a lot of damage. It is possible to use a Propeller Cat on a Squire, but it's usually better to stick with a Seahorse, as they can choose what to attack for you and help out a lot that way. Now, I don't have a Barbarian, but it's very similar, although it has certain attacks that deal a lot more damage. There are pros and cons to both, so it really kind of depends on if you own the DLC or not. Of course, there are other DPS classes, but I won't cover them, other than making a Summoner into a DPS class. The other classes I would say are more for fun if you enjoy using that class as DPS, as in general it's much harder to get them to be as effective as the main DPS classes that I've just shown you. Now, Summoner is kind of unique in some ways because he can wear two pets. You wouldn't think of him as a DPS character considering he's not allowed to have any weapons, but it can be really useful to have something such as this combo where I have a monkey that can shoot extremely long range and a genie to collect mana from the monkey's attacks. This will allow me to stay in one area and continue upgrading towers without having to move, as my pets will automatically collect mana. Some people, then again, will choose to do something such as having an imp that automatically repairs, and then a Jinlet pet from City in the Cliffs survival, which will allow you to collect mana based on it attacking by itself. The mana collection is not as high as a genie, and the damage is nowhere near as high as a monkey, but it does mana collection on its own without the need for something else attacking, which can be quite beneficial. As you can see on the Summoner, there are two main abilities. The minion movement speed only matters if you're going to cast minions, so I wouldn't worry at all about making that good. I have put no extra points into there. But the Flash Heal ability is extremely powerful at repairing large portions of the map and repairing large amounts instantly. Although it does take 150 mana, you will have to be careful how often you use this ability, lest you run out of mana before the round is over. But in general, you want to focus a lot on the Flash Heal if this is going to be a DPS character, although some people would say put it into the hero attack to do more damage with your pets. The plain fact is, Summoners just really don't do enough damage with their pets, so it's more valuable to focus on using unique abilities with pets to be able to turn the tide in your favor. Of course, you could always try using two different Guardian pets, such as a Monk Guardian to increase the range, and a Huntress Guardian to increase the attack speed of your towers.